Things are not so bad here in the U.S. One reason why we should be happy is we should thank the Federal Reserve, at least according to John Hilsenrath. Remember all those fears about deflation or inflation? According to Hilsenrath, Fed's got it just about right. Am I missing something, Hilsenrath? Am I putting words in your mouth?
Yeah, Evan, I think you didn't carefully read the email that I sent you a little earlier. So I mean, you got it.
Yeah.
You got it half right. So I'll give you some credit for that. But here's my point: we got a bunch of inflation data coming out in the next few days. Data on import prices, wholesale prices, and early next week consumer prices. The big story here is that there's no story, and that there have been two sides to this argument about inflation who've been making a lot of noise for a couple of years now. One side has been saying we're going into a deflationary spiral like the Great Depression. Another side has said the Fed has pumped so much money into the system that we're going to have hyperinflation. They're both wrong. That's my point. Both sides are wrong. And frankly, some of these voices are inside the Fed itself, which is why I'm not going to give the Fed a free pass. What you see is inflation that is not behaving the way a lot of people expected it to.
Okay.
You don't see the money printing causing inflation.
Right.
And you don't see high unemployment causing deflation.
Okay, but again, now let me try and put some words in your mouth, Hilsenrath. What you were saying is...
I'm not going to let that happen.
What you were saying is, in effect, that Ben Bernanke has gotten it just about perfectly right, given that he missed the big, asset bubble in real estate and the deleveraging, given that he missed that going back to 07. Since the crash, since the troubles of fall 2008, he's kind of played things about as well as he could. Or am I, again, putting words in your mouth?
Well, you could. I will let you make that argument, and you actually can make the argument. The one thing that the Fed has hit effectively in the Ben Bernanke tenure is its inflation number. It's hovered around 2%, plus or minus a little bit, for his entire term. In fact, he's been closer to 2% inflation than Paul Volcker was or Alan Greenspan was. You can give him credit for that. I'm not sitting here saying you should give him credit for everything, though, because obviously the Fed has dropped plenty of other balls.
Right. But it is quite remarkable that, if you go back in U.S. economic history, the periods in which the inflation indications have remained so relatively consistent and stable, it's pretty unusual, isn't it?
And this is where the critics have been really wrong. Some people say when the Fed printed so much money, it's going to cause hyperinflation. It didn't happen. A lot of other people, this is the Paul Krugman crowd, have said there's so much slack in the economy, it's going to cause deflation, or at least inflation going down much farther. That didn't happen. If you want to give the Fed a pass for asset price bubbles before and after the fact, and regulatory missteps, and judge it only on the inflation front, you could say it's been a great success. Of course, you can't do that. You've got to look at how it's performed on other levels. But it is the case. So I'll give you an example of, last year commodity prices started surging. Everyone blamed Fed policy.
And he said, hang on, it's a temporary blip, and it turned out to be a temporary blip. Okay,
you're right.
A final question for you, John. Can the ECB or the European Union authorities learn anything from Ben Bernanke's policy over the last few years, or is it basically just not applicable to what's going on in Europe?
I think what the European authorities should learn, it doesn't relate to inflation. It should relate to how the United States dealt with banks. The most unpopular thing that Hank Paulson and Tim Geithner and Ben Bernanke did was pump capital into the banking system. And our banking system is far from healthy, but it's in much better shape today than it was 3 years ago. And the Europeans have immense problems in their banks, which is preventing them from dealing with some of the fiscal issues that they've got to deal with. So that's a lesson they could learn.